And then similarly, F, H, and J are the only options for number 5, like the end of the column. F, H, or J are going to have to go at the end. G and K cannot because they have stuff that comes afterwards. So to solve the first question, what I like doing is just going through each of the rules at a time. If I have a diagram that, makes it more efficient, then I'll probably just use the diagram instead. So here I'm just going to be first looking for K has to show up between F, H, and J. So with that, I can cross out A because K is not showing up before F, H, and J. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to shut the phone off. Be right back. Sorry about that. Okay, so F, H, right. So it comes after F and H, so that doesn't work. A. B, K doesn't have F, H, and J after it again, so B is also crossed out. C I would leave open, D I would leave open, and E I could leave open. Sorry, I'll just one more time. Sorry about that. Okay. So for C, D, and E, we know that F and H have to come next to each other, and so with that I could cross C out, and then G has to come before F and H, so I could cross E out, and the answer is D. And then when I get an answer for the first question, that usually gives you a full combination or at least a partial combination. I recommend writing that down because that can be helpful for future questions. So I would write that down in the first row of my column. I would just write down K, G, J, F, and H. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And does everyone see like why it would be maybe helpful to add this in the first column or the first row? Because then, sometimes if they ask you, what letter can't go fourth, like F can go fourth. And so that's like an answer that you could just cross out right off the bat and don't have to even think about because you have a past combination that uses F in the fourth space. If J performs earlier than Ginny, which one of the following could be true? So here they're saying J performs before G, right? So the order there is going to have to be K, J, G for the first 3 letters. And the reason why I know that is because if J is going before G, in my head, if I just imagine moving these 2 letters before G, that means the order has to be K and then J and then G. Like there's no other options, right? Like if this part was just shifted here, it's going to be K, J, and G. And then F and H just have to go next to each other, but they're interchangeable, like in terms of, is H going first or F? So what I would do here is put F/H, F/H, because that's going to give me almost like 2 combinations in one. And when I'm referring back to this later, it's more simplified than having to look through 2 rows, right? And so since they're asking what could be true, this is all stuff that must be true. K being here, J being here, and G being here. So your correct answer will be one of these. Because this is stuff that could be true. Does that make sense? The difference between must be true and could be true?
Yes.
Okay. So because they're asking for something that could be true, and this is all stuff that must be true, the correct answer will be about one of these columns. And the correct answer here is A, Fernando performs fourth. Because that could be true, right? Fernando could perform fourth and H could perform fifth, and that would work.
So, that you got, well, I understand you did the work, but basically that came from you knowing that from diagramming it in your first question.
Not even from diagramming it in the first question. Do you mean like this here, or do you mean the first row here?
You okay? So the answer in the first question was K G J F H. So the reason why you know that could be true is because you diagrammed it in the first question, right?
For this row.
Yes.
Yeah, the reason why I knew this row could be true is because that was my correct answer for the first question. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
if they're asking for the first question, like what's a good combination? Like what's a combination that works? And that's almost always the first question for a lot of logic games. And so that combination that you get from the first question, you can always use. Sometimes it's a partial combination, or they'll be like, what could be the first three letters or something like that. And it's still worth writing down because a lot of times I've noticed half the time when that happens, logic games are set up in a way where you can fill out the rest of that row with the second question. So like it's worth writing down even if it's just, let's just say they only asked you like what are the first three letters, still worth writing down. This is a very simple game, so it might not, make it as much sense here, but when games get really complex, it's worth it even just to have a partial combination down because that could still give you some valuable information.
Okay.
And for as to how I solved this, I was like, what does it mean when Juanita performs earlier than Ginny, right? Like if that's the local rule that they're giving us, right? They're saying J performs before G. That's the local rule. So if that's going on, I tried to just see what was happening in general. What are the implications of that? And the implications of that are you could actually fill out the whole row, right? Except for 4 and 5, like either F or H is going in for both 4 and 5. But that helps you get the answer.
Okay.
And then number 3, we're looking for what can't be true. So for this one, I would just go through and look at, the diagram that I've made. So Fernando performs immediately before Juanita. So F right before J. Sure, I don't see like a really big problem with that. Yeah, if F performed before J, that would just mean that H has to perform before the F. And then Ginny performs immediately before H, so G before H. G immediately before H, sure, it could be GH and then F. K would just have to come before G. C, H performs immediately before G. That definitely can't happen, right? H and F have to come after G. They can't perform before G. So C would be your answer there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then number 4, the order in which the students performed is fully determined if which one of the following is true. So we're trying to figure out how we can order all of the students. Where is there ambiguity in this diagram, if that makes sense? Like where are the spots in which like we would have to know about a certain letter to figure out where the order has to go, if that makes sense. So let me know if this makes sense, but F and H, it's really hard to determine where they have to go unless you're told, right? Like unless they tell you F is going before H or H is going before F, because you don't know where they go in relation to the other letters. Like you need to be told where F is going to go or where H is going to go. So the correct answer is definitely going to mention either F or H. So, and all of them actually do. All of them mention F and H, which makes sense because otherwise you wouldn't be able to determine the order. The other thing that you need to know is whether G goes first or K goes first. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, like you can't tell just based off like the relationships between these letters, whether G's going first or K's going first. So as you get better, your intuition should be that, hey, like the correct answer should have either G or K in it. It's got to have either F or H in it. That leaves.
Do you guys know what fully determined means? Like, do you know what the question is asking you? Because I've found that a lot of students don't know what the question means or is asking them.
Good point. Good point. Do you guys know what that question is asking? For sure. Oh, that's totally fine. Great point, Akarshna. I can't believe I was just like explaining stuff. Okay. So the question is asking if like F performs before H, can you fill out all of these spaces for sure? Right? See how here we had to put F dash H because F could have gone here or here and H could have gone here or here. So what this question's asking is, if which one of these is true, can we fill out every single space for sure? Right? Like everything is set. For example, just to go over A, where it says F performs immediately before H, if we know that, let's say, sure, F performs before H, F and H can go here, or they can go here. And then, like it could be G slash K, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that's left up in the air for when you know that F performs before H. It doesn't help you fill in every single spot for sure. So if one of the answers is true, can the rest be filled out according to the rules? Of course, yes. So it's like whichever one is true, the rest of the spaces you can fill out for sure. You know without a doubt that the rest of the spaces are going to be like one letter in particular. And so, for example, the correct answer for this one is Kevin performs immediately before Fernando. And so if we know that K performs before F, why is everything determined? Does anyone want to take a stab at explaining it? Or I can just explain it if no one else wants to. So the reason why is because if K performs before F, then you know K, F, and H are going in a row, right? And if K, F, and H are going in a row, these three are going in a row. G is coming before them because G needs to come before H anyways. So it's going to be G, K, F, H. And then in terms of J, J is going to have to come after them. So if K is performing immediately before F, it would look like this. K, F, H. G would come here and J would go here because that's the only space left and it has to come after K. Does that make sense?
You did say that J is at the end, right? Like G, K, F, H, J?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. And that, because that's the only space that we have left after realizing that, you know, like G has to come before K, F, H. Those three have to go in a row because once you place F, H has to go on the other side, right? Because those two have to be next to each other. So once we've gotten these three down, we can't put these in 1, 2, and 3 because otherwise G doesn't have any space to go before F and H. So because of that, we're going to have to put them in 2, 3, and 4. And that leaves enough space for G, and then J would end up going in the 5th spot. Does that make sense?
Yes.
For any of the other answer options for this question, if you put, oh yeah, so for like you forgot which ones can go at the beginning or the end, especially for harder games when you have like a lot of rows and more variables, I really, really recommend putting what can go at the beginning and the end. So what I would recommend is putting like G/K here. G/K, and then over here putting F, H, J. Sometimes when you have like a much longer, you know, a little bit of longer diagram or more letters involved, that ends up being helpful, right? Knowing which letters can go at the end just right off the bat without even thinking about it. That's something else extra that you can add into your diagram, especially if it's not very clear from you just from looking at this. You might as well as write it out and just think about it once instead of having to think about it every time. Cool. And then next is question number 5, which is asking how many of the students are there, anyone who could perform 4th. So this is the last question. So I usually don't mind messing up my diagram a little bit. So I'll just use these letters here. So we know already that F and H can go 4th, right? We just have a lot of examples of that. That's one really good benefit to like keeping track of all of your past answer choices and just putting them all on one on top of another. So you know that F and H definitely can. So I've just circled F and H here. We know that G and K can't go 4th because K has 3 letters after it, right? And G has 2 letters after it. So they both need at least 2 spaces after it, which means they can't go 4th. Because if they go 4th, there's only 1 space left.
So just making sure, this question is asking all possible answers who can perform 4th.
Yeah, all the possible letters that can go 4th. So of like
Okay.
G, H, J, and K, they're asking which ones can go in the 4th slot.
Okay.
Cool. And then so, does it make sense why F and H definitely can?
Yes.
Okay. And then does it make sense why G and K cannot? Because I can also repeat that for why they can't.
Yes.
Okay. So G and K can't go. So I'm just going to cross those out. Those don't work. So the only one left we have is J, right? Let's see. Can J go 4th? If you put J 4th, what happens? What's going on?
F and H won't be able to be immediately before or after one another.
Exactly. Yep. They need to be right next to each other. And since G and K have to go before F and H, G and K are going to go somewhere in 1 and 2. So it's going to be like G/K, right? Those are going to go somewhere in 1 and 2 because they need, you know, K needs 3 letters after it and G needs 2 letters after it. Okay. Like F and H need to be here somewhere, but they're not going to go next to each other anymore. So J can't be here. So it's really just these 2 letters. It's F and H. So the correct answer would be B, which is 2. So does anyone have any other general questions about this game or any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
On
I
number
had a-
4, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask a quick clarification on number 4. Why couldn't B be it? I feel like that's the same kind of situation with K. And maybe I'm just missing
No.
something.
No, B. So B, I would have said, like, I would have immediately, when I saw this, crossed out A, C, and D and had B and E open and considered B and E. So B is saying G performs immediately before F, right? So where would you put letters in based off of that?
So that would mean G, F, and H are right in a row.
Yes,
All
G,
3.
F, and H are right in a row. The only issue there is G, F, and H can go here.
K has to be, right? K has to go before H.
Yeah, K has to be
Right.
before H.
Right, so K, G, F, H, J. G performs immediately.
I had B.
Gotcha. Okay, G performs immediately before F. Good question. Akarshna or Janadhi, are you seeing why B is wrong? For some reason,
For number 4.
yeah, for number 4, G performs immediately before F.
Because you could put G in a spot 2 or spot 3, and it would still be fine.
If you put G, F, and H in 3,
And then you'd put K,
you put
J.
K and J. Exactly. Yep. Because then K is still going before F and H, but then J is going second.
Gotcha. I can see it now.
Yeah. For a second, I also didn't see it. Sorry about that. Yeah. And so basically, does it make sense what I said about being able to cross out A, C, and D at the beginning though? Because they're not addressing like the fact that it's hard to see whether G or K should go first if you're not placing one of them somewhere. Like if you're not placing one of them somewhere in relation to one of these.
Yeah, I did the same thing. It was between B and E, and I was like, like kind of the same thing, but no, they're not.
Yeah, no, they're not. Yeah, K only, the only rule for J is that it has to come after K, right? There's really no other rule for J in specific. So just because the only rule is it has to come after K, it can go second. Any other questions about this game or any of the answer options or any of the questions?
I had a question. So for number 3, once you found the answer, you didn't look at the, oh, I don't know, for me, I just second guess myself the entire time when I do logic games. So do you look at any of the other options, or once you found, okay, this cannot be true, that means that the rest must be wrong? Like this is the answer, this is the only one that cannot be true? Like to save yourself time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I would say if you're like a beginner at games, it is worth it to look at all the answer choices because you're probably still making some mistakes with how you're thinking about certain things. But if you feel really confident in your diagramming and you feel really confident in, like how you're thinking about things, once you get to that point, it is definitely a waste of your time to think about all the answer choices, if that makes sense. Because once you've found what's right, like, and you feel confident in, your logic and what you've done, only one answer can be right and 4 of them are wrong, right? Does that answer your question? It makes sense to think about it for sure if you're not as confident at the beginning, right? When you're starting out and you're just doing and thinking about these kinds of concepts, makes sense to think about all of them because you might as well. But I would say when you're practicing things timed, it's good to get into that habit of finding the right answer and moving on. And if you get a question wrong, that just means you thought about it wrong, right? Those are the kinds of things you want to like find and redo so that you can figure out why you were thinking about it wrong.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Any other questions? Or Akarshna is gonna do a game next. Any other questions before then? Any other final? No? Okay, Akarshna, would you like to do the other game?
Yeah. I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see my screen or no? Oh, no.
Yes.
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay. So this is also a sequencing game. We wanted to do games that we knew wouldn't be too problematic for everyone or anyone, but let me know if this is too simple. Okay. All right. So it says exactly 6 guideposts, and I'd stop right here and write down 6 guideposts. I'll write the things down here so we can diagram on the side. So we have 6 guideposts numbered 1 through 6 that mark a mountain trail. Each guidepost pictures a different one of 6 animals. So again, I'd stop and write down the variables. So we have 6 animals this time. There are a fox, a grizzly bear, a hare, a lynx, a moose, and a porcupine. The following conditions must apply. So these are our rules now. We had our general diagram about the game, and then now we have the actual rules. The grizzly is pictured on either guidepost 3 or 4. So that means G is 3 or 4. That was ugly. Girl, there we go. Oh my God. 4, there we go. The moose guidepost is numbered lower than the hare guidepost. So this is what Sriya was talking about when she said when it's lower or bigger, when it's closer or like further away. You want to know what lower means. And in this case, it's numbers, so it's a little easier. So for a lower number, it just means number 1. So we know that the moose guidepost has to come before the hare guidepost. Does that make sense to everyone? Like, stop me if it doesn't.
Yes.
Okay. The next rule says the lynx guidepost is numbered lower than the moose guidepost, but higher than the fox one. So the lynx comes before the moose, but it also comes after the fox. Does that also make sense?
Yes.
Beautiful. And now we have this one thing that overlaps. We have M over here and M over here. So what I can do is create a bigger diagram or chain where I have F, L, M, and H. We have one that we haven't talked about. We have the letter P. P is what we call a floater. We don't have any rules about it, so it can kind of go anywhere with respect to the diagram as long as it makes sense. And we know that somewhere in here, G is also going to fit either in the 3rd spot or the 4th spot. Does that make sense to everyone?
I have a question about that. So when you have a floater, you said that it has to make sense. So in every single question, P doesn't have to be in the same spot.
No, it can go anywhere.
As long as it makes sense.
As long as it makes sense, P
Okay.
is going to go anywhere.
What is
Okay.
a floater?
A floater is a variable that doesn't have any rules attached to it. So you see that here we have a rule for F, we have a rule for G, a rule for H, a rule for L, and for M. So every single one of those variables has a rule attached to it, but P is kind of just like, I don't know, it can go anywhere at this point. That make sense?
The free spirit.
It's a free, oh, hi Nicole, it is a free spirit.
Why do we like free spirits?
They make my life easy and I don't have to worry about them too much. They can just go anywhere. I don't have to worry about them. They're non-restrictive.
Excellent.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Just can I throw in a trick? Did you stop sharing your screen on purpose, Akarshna?
No.
Did it stop for everyone or just me? Oh no, you're
I can
still sharing.
still see it.
It's just me. One thing that I do, sorry, I just jumped in here and this is something, whenever I read the rules, I love how Akarshna wrote them all out at the bottom. Whenever I read a rule and it pertains to a certain variable, I just put a dot under it. So I can quickly at the end, maybe you already did this, I'm sorry. I can see who the floater is quickly without having to reread the rules again.
Oh yeah, I just circled P.
Yeah. So like at the end, so like if I would read them, because like instead of like trying to like take time and like cross them off which one is, I just literally put a dot, but small detail.
Whatever works. There's really no wrong way to like point out variables to yourself. Like for me, I just circle it if I need to. You can also put down a dot. Games are very like, if you have a good
Of course, like, you understand what I'm saying about when I put the dots under ones that are constrained.
Yes,
so
a dot under all of these.
Yes, as I would read a rule. Yeah. Okay, never mind. You're good.
Yeah. Nicole brings up a good point though. You can really be as comfortable as you want with games and do whatever you want as long as your diagram ends up correct and you're confidently able to answer everything. So if putting dots down under the rules that are constrained helps you, that's fine. If highlighting alternate rules helps you because it draws your attention to make sure you're paying attention to all of them, that's fine too. Whatever helps you in order to get your diagram right and in order to answer your questions right is perfectly fine. As long as it's not taking up too much time either, because remember, there is a time constraint. Does anyone have any questions before we try the actual questions?
No.
No.
Okay. Let's start with number 1. Which one of the following could be an accurate list of the animals pictured on the guidepost listed in order from guidepost 1 through 6? So the way Sriya did it, she's a lot more intuitive than I am, I think. I straight up write down everything and just start crossing off answer choices when I see that it doesn't make sense. I'm very much, I go hardcore trial and error. I try everything until I get to the answer choice that is correct. But for number 1, I'd start here and I'd write out A. F, L, G, P, M, H. And for me, writing it down helps a lot in terms of being able to remember and to think about it. If I'm just looking at it on the screen, I don't know, it's harder for me. So I literally write it down because it makes more sense for me to work off the paper than to work off the screen. You don't have to do that if it doesn't work for you. But I write down and then I check against the rules. And I have a bigger diagram here so I can check that the order is right first. F is coming before L, which comes before M, which comes before H. So it fills this big diagram. And that's fine so far. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. The one other thing I have to make sure is that G comes in spot 3 or 4. And in this one, G is in spot 3, so that's fine too. So this entire thing makes sense, and P again is a floater, so it can fit in anywhere within the context of the diagram. So this looks like a right answer to me. And I choose it, and like Sriya said, I wouldn't check B, C, D, or E, and I would have saved myself the 30 or 40 seconds it would have taken me to write down and check them. Anyone have any questions?
I
What
do.
if it's not A?
Sorry, 2 people spoke at once.
I have a question. So, what I usually do is I go through the questions. I mean, would you say that that's kind of time consuming? Like, so I'll say G has to be in 3 or 4. So I'll go through A through E and look for 3 or 4 G. Is that too time consuming or?
Personally, I think it's time consuming, but it can also be like fast. Like if I were to look at this and I said it, G has to come in 3 or 4. A is fine, B is out, C is fine, D is fine, E is fine. And then I have to say M comes before H. So A is fine, C is fine, D is fine, E is out. And then F and L have to come before M. A is fine. C isn't fine because F and L have to come before N, and that's not okay. And D looks fine, but we also have to remember that F comes before L. So D is out too, and then I can choose A. So for a simple question like this, it's fine. But the more complicated your games get, it can get time consuming, especially when your diagrams or when the way they present the answers start to look more difficult. Personally, I like to just try out the answer choices because one, I can write down every way that a diagram can't work out, and I can write down the one way or one of the ways that a diagram can work out. So I have a lot of information after writing down all of my answer choices, and I go answer choice by answer choice. The reason being that if my answer choice was A, I haven't checked all 5 answer choices. I've just checked the first one and I can move on, right? But if my answer choice was A, and then I checked B, C, D, and E according to the rules, I wasted so much more time thinking about everything instead of just writing it out.
Taylor, also, I do it like you do, which I think Akarshna, Sriya, and Janadhi, they're all amazing game testers, so completely listen to their advice. I struggle with ADD, and so the reason that I do what you do is it allows me to reread the rules again, because sometimes I misread the rules, and I also like going one rule at a time because it helps me focus. So if that is a weakness of yours, that is a reason to do what you're doing, where if you're trying to get to that, like Akarshna, cutting out time, I think that switching to her strategy can be very beneficial too. So I
Okay,
think it's
great.
really knowing what your weakness, like what do you struggle with? Like I can misread a rule and I would way rather catch it on the first question than on the 5th question. But Akarshna doesn't misread rules like I do. Does
Got
that
it.
make sense?
Yeah, I got it.
And there's no wrong way to go about it. It just really is what works better for you. And if it works better for you to go rule by rule rather than answer choice by answer choice, that's perfectly fine. The caveat being it can't take up too much time. So whatever works for you in a solid amount of time is fine. Both of those will lead you to the right answer. Any
Awesome.
other questions about number 1? Okay. So let's try number 2. Which one of the following animals cannot be the one pictured on guidepost 3? The one thing I remember is G has to be in 3 or 4, and we already see up here that G can be in 3, so I'd cross out G as my answer choice immediately. It can be in guidepost 3, so I don't care about it anymore. The other thing I remember is that P is a floater. P can likely go anywhere without it breaking the rules, so I don't care about P either. Does that make any sense? Or does someone need me to clarify it?
Can you clarify?
Yeah. So remember how we had rules about F, G, H, L, and M, and how we didn't have a rule about P?
Yes.
Okay, so P is a floater. It can literally go anywhere, right? Within the context of the rules of a specific question. So this one just says which one can't be on 3. And P can be in 3 because there's no other restriction. So if we were to put P in spot.
Oh, okay. Get it. I get it because, okay, I'm sorry. I struggle with can and cannot and just paying attention to the question.
No, you're
Okay.
totally fine. Don't apologize for asking questions. Like, there's a reason we're here. So ask away.
What are the things that go through your question though? Like, Akarshna, because you're going straight, you're doing awesome on how did you know to think about G or think about P? Like, what's the step that you ask before you're looking for the most constrained and you're looking for the most loose, right?
So no, games are very difficult for me to explain because I wasn't one of those people who had to like study hard for games. So if I ever go too fast, if I ever not mention something that like I probably should have mentioned, please call me out on it so I will mention it. So when I read and it says which one of the following can't be the one pictured on guidepost 3, I know that I can cross out everything that can be in guidepost 3. And I know by my rules, G can be in 3 or 4. So I'm assuming automatically that G probably can be in 3. And then I look up here and I go, oh, in answer choice A, I literally had a working diagram where G was in 3. So I can cross out G because it can be in 3. And I'm looking for the one thing that can't be in 3. Does that make sense? Okay.
Absolutely.
And the one other thing that I knew is that P was my floater. I had it circled. I knew that I had a rule about everything else. So I know that P can contextually go anywhere as long as it doesn't break any rules. So if I put P in 3 and G in 4, that is perfectly fine. And the rest of my diagram can still work out. Like I could have switched these two and my diagrams could have still worked. Because F, L, M, and H still follow the rules and G is still following the rules while P is still in 3. So P can go in 3 and it doesn't matter to me. That also makes sense to everyone.
So do you typically look for the floater in these questions?
I try to cross off the things that I can cross out immediately without diagramming. And that's a part of building intuition that again, like no one can teach you. You just have to start like looking for patterns, looking for things that make your life easier. And for me, I want to make my life as easy as possible. Like my life is already difficult with the LSAT. I don't need to make it any more difficult. So I'm thinking, how can I possibly make it easier? And that means what can I cross off without having to diagram? So I don't have to think about B and E at all now. Does that make sense to people or no?
Yeah. Just as another perspective, like in terms of like the floater, if something's asking what must be false, it's probably not going to be an answer with the floater. Just because like if the floater can go anywhere, is it going to be false that it can't do something? Maybe not, you know? So I would sometimes it comes to the point where you do have to test out answer choices, right? Like and you just have to think about them. You might as well as instead of doing them in order, if you can see that one is not super likely to be true, maybe you can skip over it. You know, maybe you can do it at the end and instead of just starting with that one. So it can be helpful to think about, you know, what's a floater and what's not, depending on what the question is. If something's asking what could be true, there's an answer with the floater. Try that one first. It probably could be true if that letter can go anywhere. Like, you know, that's probably the right answer. But it all depends on like what your intuition's like and what your style with games is like. And you'll find that out, like the more and more you do games, the more you'll develop your own intuition and style with them.
Beautiful, thank you. And at this point, I've crossed out 2 of my answer choices, and I can just go through it and diagram them and see what can and can't work. So for 2, A says F can't be in 3. So let's plug F into 3 and see if it still works. So if F goes here, then L, M, and H goes here, and I go, wait a minute, if I put F in there, then where is G going? Because G has to be in 3 or 4. And if F is in 3, that means there's a problem. I can't put anything else in there. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Can you show us?
Yeah. So if I put F in here, then where is G going to go? G has to go in 1 or 2. And G, we know by our rules, has to go in 3 or 4. So if we put F into 3, and then L would have to go in 4, because we have this entire thing down here where we say L, M, and H all go after F. Well, now my diagram breaks. I can't possibly put every one of my variables in here, and it still works. Brianna, did you have a question?
I do have a question. So I'm a little confused about the rules, and I didn't even realize it until I was looking at this question. So why is it that F goes before L? And I could be reading the, because it says the Lynx guidepost is numbered lower than the moose. So then that means that the L would go oh, never mind. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I got it.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else have any other questions? Like, it's totally fine to ask them. Like, it's never too late to ask a question. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. And then does everyone see why plugging in F into number 3 doesn't work out? Like, it breaks our diagram, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that would mean it's our answer choice this time, because we're looking for the one thing that can't be true. And when we plug in F, our diagram breaks, so it literally cannot be true. So that would be my answer choice. I see people putting into the chat, and for some reason I can't open it. Do you want to unmute if you have a question?
I can watch. There's no questions.
Okay, beautiful, thank you.
Can you show us what a wrong answer would look like?
For
So C or D. So yeah, so like I think what you would do now is you know the right answer, so you would select it and move on. But can you show us what would happen if it was a wrong answer?
Yeah, let's try C. So this is saying L would be in guidepost 3, so I'd plug in L here. If L is in 3, I'd have to put G in 4, because those are the only 2 spots that G could be in. So I'd put G over here. And then by our rules, we know that L has to come before M, and M has to come before H. So I'd put M over here and H over here. And the 2 that we have left are F and P. P is a floater, so it can go in spot 1 or 2, and it doesn't matter with context to F. So F and P could go in 1 or 2, and my diagram would be totally fine. So if we were put L into 3, we have 2 different ways this diagram could work out, and it's fine. So it's not my answer choice anymore, because again, I'm looking for the thing that can't be true. Anyone have a question? I'm going to assume no then, and then move on to 3. If the moose is pictured on guidepost 3, then which one of the following is the lowest numbered guidepost that could picture the porcupine? English is hard today. So for these kinds of questions, the first thing I do before I move on to the answer choice is draw like a diagram and then see what happens, just to see if I could fill out the rest of my diagram or even most of my diagram. So this says the moose is pictured in guidepost 3. What would have to go in 4?
G.
Great. And then is there anything else we could fill out here automatically?
Yeah,
F,
I'm sorry.
L.
H,
L.
right? Oh.
We could fit in F and L because these 2 things have to go before M, and there's only 2 spots before M. And we know the order for them too. So F would have to go here, and L would have to go over here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So why can't we just go ahead? Oh, because H doesn't directly have to come after. Okay. I was thinking it had to be like one after another.
No,
but
they'd be
I
very
understand.
the rule that would something that would say that is like the last game. It said something had to come immediately before or immediately after another variable.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that means
Okay.
right next to each other. This just says they're earlier than or later than the other thing.
Got it.
Okay. Any more questions so far? Okay. So we know that if we put in M into 3, we'd have to put G in 4, and then F and L would have to come in 1 and 2 respectively. Our question is asking the lowest numbered guidepost that P could be in. So we have 2 spots here, 5 and 6. What is the earliest P could come?
5.
5.
So it's our floater, and we don't care with respect to the rest of it where anything else goes. So as long as H comes after M, it doesn't matter. P could be in spot 5 or 6 and it's fine, but we're looking for the earliest, so 5 would be our answer. And I can look and see D is my answer. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? I'll take that as a no. Number 4. If guidepost 5 does not picture the moose, then which one of the following must be true? So we know that it can't be in 5. Where else do we know it can't be? And it's fine if you don't know. But think about it this way. M has one thing after it. Can it be in spot 6?
No.
No.
So if it's not in spot 5 and it's not in spot 6, then it has to be somewhere between spot 1 through 4. And then
So
we also
sorry.
sorry?
No, I think I was getting ahead. I apologize.
No, go ahead and say what you were about to say because you might be thinking the same thing that I am.
That F and L still have to come before it, so it can't be 1 or 2 either.
Beautiful. That's what I was going to say.
Okay, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I love when y'all make inferences like that. That's beautiful. So we know that M has to go in spot 4 or 3, and that G has to go in spot 4 or 3. So at this point, what I'd do is I'd make the 2 worlds. I'd write M, G in 1, and then I'd write another one where I put G and M here. Does that make sense? Why I would do that? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. So now I look and see if guidepost 5 does not picture the moose, then which one of the following must be true? Either way, let me get another color. Whether M is in 3 or if it's in 4, F and L have to go in 1 and 2, right? So I'd write that in. And then we know P and H can go either way because P is a floater. So P and H can go here, and P and H can go over here. Since all of these are things that could change around, every single one of these can float around. Like M and G can go in 3 or 4, and P and H can go in 5 or 6. I know my answer choice has to be about F or L because those are the only things that I know have to be true every single time with this question. And I'm looking for a must be true. So I'm looking for the things that I know have to be true every single time. So I'm going to cross out every answer choice. It's not about F or L. So that takes out E, D, C, and B, which means A is my right answer. L has to be in 2 every single time. Does that also make sense or
The
no?
difference between must be true and could be true.
Could be true is kind of like if I plug it in, like this could happen, it doesn't have to happen. Like if this where could be true question, my right answer could be like P could be in 6. That could be true and it would be fine. I'm looking for the thing that has to happen literally every single time. Like my diagram will not work without this. And for this question, my diagram will not work if F isn't in 1 and L isn't in 2. That has to be true. So I know my choices have to be about them.
What's another answer choice that you could make up that would be sufficient or be correct for this one? Look at our diagrams and just think what letter could we say this also must be true? What could also be a correct answer, even though it's not in this one?
F would be in 1.
Oh yeah, okay, good job. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was just
I wasn't
thinking
sure if you
people.
were asking me or if you were
No,
asking.
I'm sorry. I was hanging out. I was just thinking people like, because like you were spot on about pH and pH. I was just thinking people like saw like the F and the L, how either one could be, must be true. But yeah, fabulous.
Yeah.
Even to add on, the M and G are also could be true stuff, right? Like the M can go in 3 or 4, the G can go in 3 or 4. So if this question had been asking about which of the following could be true, it would have been either about M, G, P, or H.
If this were a could be true question, I know I don't have to worry about looking for an answer that's about F or L, because those are must be true. Does that make sense to everyone, the difference between could be true and must be true, and how you can tell what you're looking for?
So basically, when you have a could be true, you're gonna go with okay, so I'm sorry, how I word this. Okay, so F and L are must be true. So we're not gonna go with the answer choice if it's asking for a could be true. We're not gonna go with that because those are must be truths. I mean, they're still true, but we want to go with the lesser, like, the instead of 100%, we're gonna go with something that can be swapped out, like M and G.
Okay, not exactly, because for a could be true question, the answer could still be like something that must be true. It's just more likely that it's gonna be something that's more vague rather than something that is set. So for a could be true question, our right answer would more likely be about M, G, P, or H than it would be about F and L.
Would a could be true have answer choice A in it? Do you think?
So
It could. I mean, the LSAT could say, let me give them 4 wrong answers, and the right answer for a could be true question could also be like something that must be true for that diagram, because if it must be true, then it also could be true. Like that makes sense.
that's that's true for the real world, right? Like if something must be true, then it's something that could be true, right? But for the LSAT, almost always the answer for a must be true question will be something that's definitively set, and the answer for a could be true question will be something that can go either here or there. I can't actually think of any one specific example off the top of my head where they used a must be true answer that's correct for a could be true thing. Usually, what ends up happening though is sometimes you might have one option, right? Like you might have one combination and you have G's like somewhere, and you don't realize that that's something that could also go somewhere else. But if that's something that if that's the only answer that you have left that's not crossed out, you should still pick that, even if you can't see where else G can go. Like it probably can go somewhere else if that's a could be true question, but since that's the only answer you have left and it's something that could be true, you should still pick it. Does that make any sense?
Got it. I got it.
Okay.
Anyone have any other questions about number 4? I'm gonna take that as a no. And if someone, oh my god, if someone puts anything in the chat, please let me know, because for some reason I cannot pull it up. But let's try number 5. Which one of the following animals could be pictured on any one of the guideposts? Okay, I stop here immediately, because what did we talk about when we went over our rules?
The porcupine is a floater.
So what does that mean for the porcupine?
It can go anywhere as long as it makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm automatically looking for that in my answer choice, because I know it's the one that's not constrained by any rules, and I'm looking for the thing that can be going on any guidepost. And the porcupine is an answer here. It's E. I don't even diagram it. I logically know it can go anywhere because there's no rules about P. So that's my answer, and I move on. Does that make sense or no?
Yes.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Anyone have any questions about that?
What would you do if you didn't know that? Like we freak out on test day and we can't remember that.
I'd start thinking about it logically, and I'd think about, okay, can F go anywhere? I know that F has rules that say that it has to come before L, M, and H, so logically it can't go in spot 4, 5, or 6, because if I were to put them there, then L, M, and H can't follow it. So I'd cross out A. For B says H, so I would think, can H go anywhere? And H has 3 things before it, so I know that it can't go in spots 1, 2, or 3, because then it would have no spot for F, L, and M. So I wouldn't do that either. Then it says C is L. Can L go anywhere? Well, L has 2 things after it, so L can't go in spot 5 or 6 because then it wouldn't leave a spot for M and H. So I'd cross out C2. Then D says M. M has one thing after it, so I know it can't go in spot 6. So that can't go anywhere either. And that still leaves me with only one option. So even if you didn't remember your floater, you can still think, can this go literally anywhere? And 4 of them are going to be no, it can't go literally anywhere. There's going to be too many rules about it. Any questions?
But but I'm just wanted to add this. Could you also think about it in terms of every other thing has constraints? So that means that somewhere along the way they won't be able to go anywhere. I mean, just anywhere.
Yes, that's the point of our floater. It can go literally
Mhm.
anywhere. But say you were taking the test and then in your like, I don't know, it was the first section you saw and this is like the 4th game or something and you're running out of time. You got anxious and you forgot what a floater is. You forgot what your floater is. If you had to, you could still think about this without remembering what your floater is and you can still get the right answer. For us, lucky, we remembered what a floater is. We remembered what our floater is. So we were able to say, oh, our floater is a thing that can go anywhere. So that's our right answer. But if we forgot, there's still a way for us to get to the right answer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone have any questions about 5 before I go to 6?
I had like an additional thought to add on about floaters.
Yes.
So sometimes as you get more advanced games, like sometimes you'll have 2 floaters, and like anytime you have 2 floaters, it's also really like important to remember that they're interchangeable completely. So like anytime you're writing down a combination, if you're keeping track of all of them, let's say P and M were both floaters, you can every time you write down P, you could just write down P/M. Every time you're trying to write down M, you could write down M/P. That's a good thing to know about, if 2 floaters, if that, your game has 2 floaters, usually they're just interchangeable. And then another thing to know is when your games get more advanced, your floater might still have like a slight limitation, but it's still good to think about what has the least limitations because that's almost like a floater, right? So it's not necessarily, you don't have to think about floaters as like they have absolutely no restrictions because maybe eventually you'll get a game where like, all of them have restrictions, but it's just like P has the least, like it barely has restrictions. Then you can still think about P in that way where like, hey, it has the least restrictions. It's not probably going to be the answer for something that must be false. Similar things still apply, if that makes sense.
The other thing to remember is that for floater, the questions could still introduce constraints for them. So one of these questions could have literally said something like, if P comes before G, what happens? And that's like the time that like floaters have constraints and then you have to think about them that way. Does that also make sense to everyone? What Sriya and I just said?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you guys ready to move on to number 6 then?
Yes.
Okay, great. If the moose guidepost is numbered exactly 1 higher than the lynx guidepost, which one of the following could be true? Okay, I don't remember who asked a question, but I know one of you asked about when they're immediately after another. This is a case when they're saying M is immediately after L. So it changes our diagram a little bit where instead of just M after L, it's F, L, M, like M directly after L, and then H. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and this could be true question. So I'd literally just diagram and see if anything works. I'm looking at it and I can cross off 2 answer choices though. I can cross off B and I can cross out D. The reason being, if I were to put M in 4, I'd have to put L in 3 and I won't have anywhere to put G. So that would break my diagram. And then for D, if I were to put L in 3, I'd have to put M in 4, and that would also leave no space for G. So I can't have that happening. Make sense?
Yes.
Any questions? Okay. So now I'm just going to diagram and see if anything works out. Guidepost 5 pictures the hair. So I put the hair here. I know that L and M are together. They can't be in 3 and 4 because that would break my diagram. So I'd put G over here, L and M over here, F over here, and P over here. And that works out perfectly fine. It doesn't break any of my rules and it fits the constraint. And it could be true, so it's my answer. I'm looking for the thing that can be true. I know everything else is going to be wrong. Red choose it and move on. Does that make sense to everyone or no?
It makes sense.
Okay. Anyone have any questions about this game or any of the questions? Okay. Yes. Someone just unmuted themselves. I don't know if that meant you had a question or no.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't apologize. Okay. Anyone have any questions about games in general then?